Mate, bush poetry. What a mate for a lot of my friends who have come out of Metallica or the Taylor Swift world. How do you define bush poetry?
Well, the Australian Bush Poets Association says bush poetry is poetry with rhyme and rhythm about Australia, Australians, or the Australian way of life.
Okay, so
So
how
it's
did you
pretty
get
broad.
into it?
Uh, I'd seen an ad in the local paper for a poets cafe poetry evening, and I thought, oh, I should go to that one night. And when I eventually did, it was a night that changed my life. I saw people performing poetry, and I went, wow, why haven't I seen this before? And the rest is history, I guess you'd say.
Mate, where was that? Where did that happen at?
That was at the Parakeet Poets at the Parakeet Cafe in Katoomba, which no longer exists, unfortunately. Katoomba does,
Okay,
but not the cafe.
yeah. So you're a New South Wales boy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, lived in the Blue Mountains most of my life.
Now, obviously, we'll get to talking about it in a while, but you're pretty much one of Australia's most prized possessions is, of course, the Waltzing Matilda by Banjo Patterson, and you're like
Mm.
Australia's expert on that. And I know you've been doing a tour recently following a lecture tour that he did. But mate,
Yeah.
I'd like to explore at first a little bit more about the bush poetry because obviously I'm a songwriter, and a lot of my friends are as well. I've got other friends. I don't know. Do you know Rupert McCall at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, Rupert's a
I
good friend
haven't
of
actually met him, but I know of him. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful poet as well. And I
Yeah.
know he's a lot of the bush poets have been associated to Rupert over the years as well. But mate, what type of poetry do you write? When you say about Australians, are you inspired by like things you've learned through history, or things you've seen yourself firsthand, or where does that come from?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. It's a lot of people ask me what my inspiration is, but it can be anything really. It can be just a conversation, or someone will say, "Oh, you should write a poem about that, Greg," and sometimes that's turned out to be a good poem. Yeah, other times just things that cross my mind, and I guess modern bush poetry is not so much about drovers and cattle and sheep and
Yeah.
all the country things. It can be about anything in the normal uh, life of the poet. So there are poems about everything from shopping to eating to dancing and all sorts of things.
So, Matt, when you perform, obviously you got some of your stuff you do. Do you also draw from a lot of the older bush poets as well that were living in those times where they were the drovers and they were the cattlemen and those things?
Yeah, yeah. It's always good to bring up some of the older classics, and usually bush poetry competitions have a section for um, traditional poetry. So that's where you perform a Banjo Patterson or a Henry Lawson or one of the other great poets that we've had over the years. And it's still very much a part of bush poetry today. I think we've got a long heritage of it, and it's great to keep it alive.
It's one thing I think we've missed a little bit in our modern society. Like I'm listening to an audio book at the moment about the Eureka Stockade and how that all
Mm.
came about. And we have such a rich wealth of not just experiences but characters in our history. And I think one thing
Yeah.
about bush poetry is it really does capture a lot of those characters. And one of the things I'm trying to do with my little podcast here is, as much as possible, try and find some of those characters in some of those regional areas which still exist today. Like, they've kind of, they might be the coach of the local footy team that's kind of raised the whole community almost in a character. But we've had those type of characters go back through history, through our in our poetry and our songs and things about Australia.
Mm.
What are some of the ones that you'd say would stick out to you from the historical lens, like besides Waltzing Matilda, which we'll get to, but some of the other ones that stick out to you?
Yeah, well, certainly the man from Ironbark and Mulga Bill with his
Yeah.
bicycle, and um, Henry Lawson had a few great characters as well, particularly in his short stories.
Hmm.
And yeah, Steele Rudd had some great characters as well.
Still Rudd. What was some of his stuff? What was that about?
Yeah, he was writing most of these short stories too. He was from Queensland and probably a bit later than Henry Lawson and Banjo Patterson, but he really brought out the um, tough life of the farmers. He was around the Darling Downs, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was that kind of like turn of the 1800s to 1900s, around that time, or what sort of period
Yeah,
is that?
sort of early 1900s for Steel Rudd, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so how well, most of those things, obviously, you didn't have broadcasting things we had these days. Well, most of those things are released through newspapers and stuff like that. What was the way people heard about them?
Yeah, mostly through newspapers, particularly the Bulletin. Bulletin
Right.
was known as the Bushman's Bible, and there are
Okay.
lots of great poetry in there over many years. And it's the thing that really made Henry Lawson and Banjo Paterson famous, and lots of other great poets too.
Right. Okay. Mate, so obviously, you're so famously known for the work you do in Winton with
Mm.
Waltzing Matilda. What was your background to that? How did you come across that? And I've got to ask this one too. This is just my curiosity. So Gregory North plays at the North Gregory Hotel.
Yeah,
Is that the
pretty good,
greatest
isn't it?
marketing
Eh?
scheme ever, or was that just a natural thing? How did that come about, mate?
Oh no, they named the hotel after me 89 years before I was born.
You're a time traveler.
Yeah, very forward thinking in Winton.
And just to put that in concept for people, how many shows have you done there at that hotel?
Over 1,000 shows now.
Over a
Yeah, I clocked
thousand
up the
shows.
1,000th show in August, I think it was this year. Yeah.
So you've become a tourist destination in Winton for people to come and celebrate Waltzing Matilda and Banjo Patterson. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess so. It's a great feeling, something I'm very proud of, really, that people
Absolutely.
come to Winton and have to go and see the poet. And it just happens that it's Gregory North at the North Gregory Hotel. Yeah.
So put that in concept. So one, as I said, how did you stumble onto doing or how did you end up working with the poem and your tie into Winton and the hotel? What's the background to that story, mate?
When I went to that first cafe poetry evening, one of the performers there that really caught my eye was a bloke named Milton Taylor, and he was a several-time Australian champion bush poet. He would often he'd go to Winton seasonally, and he'd been doing it for many years. And there's been a poet in the caravan park in Winton for over 30 years, and it might even be close to 40 now. And Milton was one of them. When he stopped doing it, he handed it over to Mel and Susie, who are also very famous and great performers in bush poetry. They're now
Mm.
in Lightning Ridge. When they decided to move to Lightning Ridge, the spot in Winton became available, and they suggested me, and luckily they said yes. So I became the poet in the caravan park there, and it just so happened that the hotel was called the North Gregory Hotel, and
That's
the
great.
next year I managed to talk my way into getting a, a what's the word, an
The,
appearance in front of the owner of the hotel, and that ended up leading into shows about Banjo Paterson and Waltzing Matilda, because the North Gregory Hotel is where Waltzing Matilda was said to have had its first public performance.
performance, yeah. So, mate, do you mind if we dive into some of that history behind behind Waltzing Matilda?
Sure.
So, I actually did the show a couple of years ago. I was just getting on the road before COVID hit, and that kind of killed it. It was called the Sunshine State of Mind show, which I'd come up with this theme and everything, and I was telling stories. And one of the stories I told was about Waltzing Matilda. And I can't remember whether it was you or someone else at the time that I'd seen were doing a version of what we thought was the closest original version of what Waltzing Matilda sounded like. Because it has
Mm.
gone through some evolutions, hasn't it? I mean, it got sold at one time to a tea company, I believe, as an advertising thing.
Yep.
So there's all this history. But if we go back to the very beginning, there's a bit of a love triangle involved at the beginning of it. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, Banjo went to Winton to visit his fiancée, Sarah Riley.
Hmm.
She'd gone to Winton to visit her brothers, who ran Vindex Station just out to the east of town. And one of her brothers, Frederick Whistler Riley, was the stock and station agent in Winton. He'd married a local girl, and they were expecting their first child. So Sarah arrived about 3 weeks before the birth of the child. Her name was Phyllis. Phyllis, unfortunately, never reached her 8th birthday. She died from bronchitis and is buried in the Winton Cemetery, and was later joined by her parents. But I think that was Sarah's main reason for going to Winton. And She arrived in May of 1895, stayed for almost 12 months, and Banjo went to visit her while she was there.
So at this time, Banjo was already a famous person, was he, in Australia?
Yeah, he hadn't published his first book,
Okay.
so he was just known as the Banjo, as a writer, and
Mhm.
very few people knew the true identity of the Banjo.
Right.
So that's one of the strange things about. Well, the question that's always bothered me is how and when Banjo Paterson got to Winton to write Waltzing Matilda.
Right.
There's no good evidence to say when it was, and the local paper unfortunately isn't available. There's no copies surviving, but I don't think they would have reported the arrival of a bloke named Barty Patterson because
Mm.
no one knew that he was the famous poet, the Banjo.
Okay, so he went by Barty, did he, not Andrew?
Yeah, the friends and family call him Barty. Yep.
Barty, right.
His
Hmm.
his name was Andrew Barton Patterson. Andrew was his
Right.
father's name. Barton
Okay.
was his mother's family name. So to distinguish the two, I guess they called the youngster Barty. And Barty went to Winton to visit his fiancée. She had a friend that she'd met at Madame Fun's finishing school in Melbourne. Her name was Christina McPherson.
Hmm.
And she had also gone to Winton to visit her brothers, who ran Dagworth Station out the other side of Winton. And it's interesting, lots of the Victorians who'd made their money through gold or through pastoral activities, once Queensland was declared its own colony and opened up land to make money, lots of those Victorians sent their sons up to the vision splendid sunlit plains extended of Queensland to make their fortunes as their fathers had. So
Most
that's
of the
why
Victorians
those
still come up here, mate, to take over, try and take over our state, mate. Same
they
story.
do, yeah. Yeah.
so,
So once
so,
Banjo had
yeah.
arrived in
So,
Winton, they decided they'd meet up. So I think, although it's not confirmed either, I think that Sarah and Banjo took the 2-day coach ride from Winton out to Dagworth, met up with Christina, and while they were there, she played a tune that she'd heard at the Warrnambool steeplechase races in Victoria the year before.
hmm, hmm.
And Banjo said it was very nice, and he asked what it was called. She said she didn't know. And he said, well, why don't you sing the words to it? And Banjo said, well, I don't know if there are any words. So he decided to make his own.
Right. So
And
that's
that's how
true.
we
It
got
came from
Waltzing
the
Matilda.
steeple. Mate, this is good for me because these were things I'd kind of researched a bit, and I put when I was doing my show, I put into my story, and so I'll throw things out there at you, and some of them obviously I've got right. I'm sure I've got some of them wrong, so please just shoot me down at anything I say. But this is so exciting for me talking to you about this. So thank you. So
It's
Dagworth
a great
Station,
story.
yeah, it's a great story. Dagworth Station. So how far outside of Winton is that?
It's about 135 k's from Winton Township.
Okay.
So that's why it was
So
2 days in a coach for Banjo to get there.
Christina was staying at Dagworth, or was she in Winton? Winton.
Christina was in Dagworth originally.
Okay.
There are some stories that say she came back to Winton at some stage, and that's quite possible, but we don't know for sure, really.
Now, is it right that we don't know whether anything really happened, but there was a bit of an attraction that seemed to happen between Christina and Banjo? Is that and that kind of
Yeah.
put Sarah out of sorts? Was that true?
Yeah, I think that's the way it goes. Like I say, we don't really have the evidence. I wonder if Banjo kept a diary. He kept a diary later in his life, so I wonder why there's no diary for around that time. Maybe it got burnt by someone in the family because of what happened. I don't know, but yeah, she something was said to have occurred in those intimate moments of writing a song together, which is seems quite plausible, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so some people think there was an affair between Banjo and Christina, and that's why Sarah ended their engagement, which had been 7 years.
Yeah.
So it could have been because of those flirtations, or it could have been that she was sick of waiting for 7 years.
Yeah.
A couple of people from the Riley family, the relatives, they came to me in Winton this year, I think it was, and they said that Sarah had already broken up with Banjo and she came to Queensland to get away from him. So
Right.
that's a
Okay.
possibility as well.
He might have been chasing after you. So,
Yeah.
so the story of the song. So the Swagman and as far as I know, once again, mate, you correct me on all this, please, totally. There was a lot of this came around the time when there were issues with the shearers and the politics, where I think they were the shearers going on strike, and they were the landowners were bringing over guys from New Zealand to do their job. Was that what happened around that time?
Yeah, there were two strikes. First one was 1891, and the the Unionists wanted only union members to work in wool sheds and shearing sheds,
And
and
this
the
was all
pastoralists.
prior to the Labor Party starting and all that, wasn't it? To build up to all that, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
before the Labor Party. Yeah, it's one of the things that sort of helped it develop, I guess.
Mm.
So they wanted to only have unionists work in those wool sheds and shearing sheds, and the pastoralists wanted to have freedom of contract. They wanted to be able to hire whoever they wanted at under their conditions. So the unionists went on strike. The pastoralists told the government sent out free labourers or non-unionists,
Hmm.
some of whom were probably from New Zealand, and they shore the sheep. And so the unionists went on strike. It was a bit of a protracted battle, and it had nasty consequences in some places. And I think 13 unionists were jailed and sent to St Helena.
And this is
Um,
true. I think from what I was reading, there was something like actually like 1,000 soldiers or something the government sent up to quell the so-called rebellion. Whatever was it that
yeah,
big?
yeah, the government called it an insurrection, and they sent lots of police and then followed it up with troops. So it was a pretty serious time in Australia's history, really.
Yeah, or
It's
like Eureka Stockade. We seem to have these
yeah,
moments that we never really hear about or talk about, where we never had a civil war, but we have these moments where it's kind of funny. They were very intense. They were very full on. They led to like in this case, the establishment of the world's first Labor Party. Um, but it's like Aussies. We started back then where we'd sort of start something, but we always get to the point where we go, that's enough. Let's chill out and have a barbecue type thing. It kind of never really
yeah,
extended into something bigger, which thank goodness I think's been part of our nature. But was it
yeah.
during that time? Was it on Dagwood that one of the wool barns got burnt down or something?
Yeah, there was a second strike in 1894, and in September, the wool shed at Dagworth was burnt down, and um, there was it was said that there were a group of Union shearers that camped by Billabong. They rode out in the dead of night to the shearing shed, started firing at the buildings where some of the owners and workers were sleeping. They were awoken, started to return fire, and during the firefight, one of the Union shearers crept out to the shearing shed, spread a bit of kerosene, and lit a match.
Yeah.
So no one from Dagworth could get close to fight the fire. So the wool shed was virtually destroyed, and about 140 lambs were killed in the fire. The raiding party escaped under the cover of darkness, and just as rain began to fall, that covered most of their tracks, so they couldn't find which direction they went next morning. They took a few samples of bullets that had been fired and found a few gates had been left open, which perhaps gave them a bit of an idea which direction they went. But
Hmm.
the owner and the policeman who'd been stationed at Dagworth because of the unrest from the strike, they set off to the nearest police station, which was Kainoona, and there was two policemen stationed there. And Richard McGoffin, who did lots of research into the beginnings of Waltzing Matilda and wrote lots of books about it, he reckons that the two policemen at Kainoona, plus the owner of Dagworth Station, Christina's brother, Bob McPherson, and the other policeman that was stationed at Dagworth, so three policemen and the squatter, all rode out to the Billabong to because the police had heard there was a suicide of a swagman by Billabong.
Was that the
So
Italian guy? Italian name?
uh, no, it's a sort of Germanic name,
Jimmy, oh,
um,
Jimmy, you're right.
Samuel
You,
Hofmeister.
Hofmeister, that's right. I mean, I knew it was a
Yeah,
European one. Sorry, yeah, Hofmeister. Yeah.
yeah. So he reckons that they rode out to the Billabong. They found the body of this suicided swagman, who was Samuel Hofmeister, who was a Union shearer, and he was said to have been found with a rifle next to him, which had bullets similar to those found at Dagworth. He had a bullet wound through the roof of his mouth, and he was in a camp with somewhere between 7 and 11 union shearers, some of whom were said to have had criminal records. And none of those men, which was a bit strange, were charged with the burning of Dagworth woolshed,
You're
which I
right.
don't really understand.
Well, I think it's a bit of a like a police mystery story, isn't it? We still don't know whether he did commit suicide, whether one of those guys shot him, or even whether the coppers and the owner of the land shot him. It's one of those mysteries that will never be solved. Is that a correct way to look at it?
Yeah, absolutely. There's Dennis O'Keefe, who recorded a version of Waltzing Matilda that was very close to the original that he reckoned Banjo would have sung. He also wrote a book about Waltzing Matilda. He reckons there was a police cover-up, that other people had motive to see Samuel Hofmeister dead, not the least of which was the squatter, Bob McPherson, who just had his woolshed burnt down and 140
Yeah.
lambs killed. Then there were the police that were looking to end the strife because of the strike in that area. And then there were his union shearer mates, some of whom were said to have had criminal records, who maybe thought he'd gone too far by burning down yet another woolshed, or maybe
Struck a
gone too
deal.
far by killing 140 lambs.
Yeah. So
So
they
it could
might
have
have
been
struck a
any of
deal.
them.
Yeah, any of them.
Yeah.
And we will never know, but it's really interesting that this song we get up and sing without thinking about it, at sporting events, whatever, has this rich story behind it that's so amazing. And then so you bring that side of it in. What I thought was the case was while Banjo was there at the station with Bob, he actually did a ride around the station and got to see these places and see Bob's story of it, hear what happened from his side, and that
Yeah.
became basically the skeleton story for him to write the lyrics around. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. Benjamin Linder wrote a book a couple of years back, and he seems to think that it was just a love song between Banjo and Christina,
Yeah.
and he sort of discounts the shearer strike, but I think it had to have something to do with the shearer strike. He was certainly
Well,
influenced by it.
yeah, I can't see how you can
Yeah.
take it out of it when you talk about the death at the Billabong and
Mm.
the Jolly Swagman, all those things. When Bob Dylan writes a song about Carter and Hurricane, things like that, you don't go into all the details. It's like you create this story around it that kind of is built from a narrative, but it doesn't tell you're not writing a novel. You're writing
Yeah.
something that just feeds off something and creates a song that becomes of interest.
Mm.
So they
That's
wrote
part
the
of the beauty
song.
of Waltzing Matilda. We don't know all the answers. It's still a bit of a mystery. I mean, even
Absolutely.
when they found Samuel Hofmeister, they cut off his head. They buried the body the next day. They sent the head to the police museum in Brisbane, where it has since disappeared. So still plenty of mystery to the story.
All right, we've got a new thing to start, folks. We're going to start a campaign to find Hofmeister's head. Which government department is it sitting in?
Yeah.
Brilliant. So they wrote the song. When did they first perform it at the pub?
Well, there's another bit of interesting things too. There's no real record that they performed it at the pub.
Right.
Um,
It
I
could
think
be
it's been a bit
legend.
confused. The Premier of Queensland visited Winton in April of 1895,
Mm-hmm.
and lots of people reckon that's when Waltzing Matilda was first written. But I don't think the banjo went to Winton until after April 1895.
Right.
It was probably August, but like I said, there's no evidence to say exactly when it was. It could have even been January of 1896. That's where my money would be if I had to bet. So it couldn't have been first performed at the North Gregory Hotel in April of 1895 because it wasn't even written.
Right. And
But
he didn't see it as a serious work, did he? He thought it was something that was just a bit of fun, and he never actually. He pretty
yeah,
much gave it away. Didn't
yeah, that's right. He thought it was a bit of fun trying to impress the ladies and, yeah, a bit of a lark, and it probably worked quite well. It was obviously very popular with the McPhersons. There is a report of them going to another station, which is whose name I've forgotten just at the moment, but they met up
The
with
one
their
next
friends
door.
there.
Yeah, the next door
Well,
neighbours.
it's sort of next door, but it's a long way away. um, oh, I can't think of the name of it. Anyway, they sang Waltzing Matilda, and that was run by the Ramsey family. It was called Oondaroo, that's right. They went to Oondaroo Station, was run by the Ramsey family, and one of them was a very good baritone. And he dressed up as a swagman, and they
Right.
sang Waltzing Matilda. So I think
And
that was probably in January of 1896.
yeah,
And some people reckon, well, I think maybe that's when the song was written. But the definite first performance of Waltzing Matilda in an official capacity was when the governor of Queensland visited Winton, and it was performed in the Post Office Hotel in 1901. There's
okay.
newspaper reports to prove that, but that was certainly a long time after Banjo had written it.
So after Banjo had written it and whether they performed it or not, I can't remember. Was he kind of run off the station by the McPhersons because of the kind of love triangle thing, or was there conflict between them, or were they actually all good friends, or what happened with that relationship?
Yeah, I don't know. There's some reports that he was run off a station by the McPhersons because of his little dalliance with Christina, but I'm not sure if I could buy that one because the McPhersons were very happy to sing the song all
Yep.
around the district for years after that. So, yeah, I'm not really sure about that one. And if Banjo
It
did
become their
visit,
promotional material.
yeah, maybe. If that Banjo did visit in August of 1895, he definitely went back again in January of 1896. And I think
Right.
that's when they sang it at Oondaroo and the
Hmm.
McPhersons were with him.
Right.
So if they had a problem with Banjo because of Christina from his previous visit, they obviously they'd got over it or it didn't happen at all by the time he came back in January 1896.
Mate, what stage did Banjo become like recognisably famous around the country? What age? What years were that?
Um, October of 1895, his first book was published, The Man from Snowy River and Other Verses, and it was then that people found out the banjo was Andrew Barton Patterson, solicitor
Okay.
from Sydney.
So by the time he
So,
went back up, he was like a superstar in a sense.
yeah, he was a bit. So
So
some
they would
people
have been
say he
clinging
went.
like that. Sorry.
Some people say he went to Queensland to escape all that celebrity because he was a very private person. He didn't like all that publicity stuff. So maybe that's why he went back to Queensland, or perhaps visited for the first time, depending on when he did go. I don't know.
So, mate, as a songwriter, obviously you cling onto your material. What did he do with his song? Obviously, it would have been written down in music back in those days, tablet in notation form as a music piece. Had no one
Well, I
to
don't think
record.
it was. When he just wrote the words, Christina wrote a letter to a bloke named Thomas Woods, who was he was sort of researching Australian folk songs in the 1930s, I think it was. She wrote a letter to him to say that Banjo asked her to send him the music. And she wrote in her letter that she never actually sent to this bloke that she wasn't much of a musician, but she put it down as best she could and sent it off. And I think that's what went to Mari Cowan of the James Inglis Tea Company, and that's how she put together her version of Waltzing Matilda.
So, do we know if the melody was kind of close to what we know of the melody now?
Yeah, we've Richard McGoffin managed to find the music for the march tune that Christina heard at the Warrnambool
At the
steeplechase
races?
races, and while it's not the same as Waltzing Matilda, it's very close, and the
Right,
original words fit in pretty easily.
right.
And that's
And I think
what,
that the tea company did change it slightly, didn't they?
yeah, they changed it quite a bit, really. The original song had "Who'll Come a Waltzing Matilda, My Darling." They
Yep,
took "My Darling" out of the song. They made the swagman jolly,
yep.
maybe in expectation of his Billy Tea on the boil, He made the sheep jolly as well, and changed the whole spirit of the song. Really,
Took it really
maybe
from
to
a love
banjo as well.
song, took it from a love song or romantic song to a um, yeah, more of a folk song, I guess.
Yeah, yep. And then they
And
printed the words of music and gave them away with every box of Billy Tea that they sold. So it was a very good marketing ploy, and that's how the words of Waltzing Matilda began to grow and its popularity. And they're the words of music that most people know and sing today.
they gave away the early 1900s version of a free CD.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
And I don't know whether this is folklore or true, but when our soldiers were marching to the ships in World War One, is it true that it was played as they were marching down, and banjo kind of got to experience that being played as they were marching, or is that folklore?
Yeah, he was at one of the army camps with a journalist friend, and the journalist wrote that Banjo said to him while they were playing Waltzing Matilda out in the yard that he'd only got a fiver for the tune, but it fills my heart with joy, or something to that effect, to hear it sung like that.
Mm.
So he became proud of it in the end, but he never really spoke about it. And even when people asked him about Waltzing Matilda, he sort of fobbed them off.
And
So
this is
we don't
amazing. A
really
song
know.
like that, a song like that, has lived so long and almost become our unofficial national anthem. And some people think it should be our national anthem.
Yeah.
It's just amazing that a song has that longevity and that story behind it. Mate, this story, is that the type of things you do in your show? You talk about these
Yeah.
things, or yeah?
Yeah, I have three different shows that I do at the hotel. One's about the life and rhymes of Banjo Patterson, another one's the mysteries of Waltzing Matilda, and the other one's about what Winton was like when Banjo visited.
Very cool. And what's the tour you've been doing? You followed, because banjo was involved in the Boer War in some way, correct?
Yeah, he went to be a war correspondent in South Africa. He was up for a bit of adventure, so he sailed with the New South Wales Lancers, the equivalent of the cavalry back then, to South Africa. He followed them around, reported on all the various battles, and cabled it back to Sydney. And some people say that his reports of the Boer War was some of his most descriptive writing of his career. He was there for about 6 months or so, rode about 5,000 kilometres on his horse. Then, when he got back to Australia, a bloke named Robert Sparrow Smythe approached him, and Smythe was an entrepreneur. He'd conducted lecture tours by famous people and musicians around Australia and around the world, including people like Mark Twain. So he said to Banjo Patterson, "You should do a lecture tour telling everyone all about the Boer War," which was still going on at that time. So Banjo was convinced, and he put together 3 or 4 different lectures and the photographs to go with them. And he did his first show in Sydney, and it didn't go very well. He was
You've been, it's that tour is what you've been following, correct? The speaking tour.
Yeah. So he went to 94 different towns. Sorry, did 94 shows in 54 towns through Australia and New Zealand,
And sorry,
and
I interrupted you
ongoing.
there. Sydney, why didn't Sydney go well, and what did he do beyond that to fix it?
Uh, his first show in Sydney was in a very big hall, about 2,000 people there, and he got a really big ovation when he got on stage, and that seemed to unnerve him a bit. And the report next day said he was very nervous. He didn't have great oratory skills and was all very awkward, which I was very surprised to read. I thought that
Yeah.
Banjo, who'd been a solicitor and had written all those great poems, would be a great speaker, but it seems that wasn't quite the case. But he did improve, and uh,
And how many
while
venues so how many places did he do after that? Where he improved?
so he did 4 shows in Sydney. The second show, the report said he'd overcome his nervousness quite a bit, and he had a very colloquial style, but he still didn't have great oratory skills. He kept looking at his feet and had his hands in his pockets, and it wasn't a great entertaining show. But all the things that he said were very interesting, and he had a very conversational style with flashes of dry humour. And I'm sure as he went along, he improved and found out what worked and what didn't, and probably got a bit of advice from Robert Sparrow Smythe as well. And the reports are varied, I guess. Some people say it was awful. Others said that that conversational style had lots of information that people found interesting, and you could take it that whatever he said was the absolute truth.
So, how many shows did you end up doing all up in that tour?
So about 94 shows in 56 places or something like that. So I'm trying to go to or most, if not all, of those places on the same date, 125 years later, and I do my Life and Rhymes of Banjo Patterson show.
And how far are you into it now?
I've done about 20 shows so far, and tomorrow I'm off on a cruise to New Zealand, and that gets me to Dunedin on the same date that Banjo Patterson was there. And so I do a show there, and then Christchurch, and then off to the North Island. And he was obviously very popular in New Zealand. He extended his tour there. He was supposed to come home to Sydney for the Federation festivities in 1901, January, and been commissioned to write a poem for that, but he never made it back. He stayed in New Zealand and extended his tour there. So I'm not going to get to all the places he went to in New Zealand because I'm coming home for Christmas, but I'm going to quite a lot, and hopefully people will still remember who Banjo Patterson is.
Absolutely. So, that tour he did with the Boer War, were there written transcripts of what he said, or do you have an idea of what he was speaking about? Are you following are you kind of working on your creativity in what you say, or you're following sort of evidence you had about what he spoke about?
Yeah, there's no transcripts that I could find. The only way I know what he talked about was reports from the newspapers. Some of them
Yep,
were quite detailed about all the things that he said, and that's not what I'm doing in my show because I know most people don't even know what the Boer War was or when it was.
sure.
So my show is just about his life and rhymes. I do
Yeah,
mention a bit
awesome.
about the
Yeah.
the tour, particularly the bits that are relevant to those places where I'm performing. Yeah.
Well, it's amazing you're keeping that stuff alive. Thank you so much for all that you're doing. Now, I've got down the bottom there your website, sort of running across what we're doing. Is that where people can catch up with where you're performing at and what you're doing and
Yeah,
things?
there's a list on there of where I've been for the tour and where I'm going next. So after New Zealand, I come back to, I'll be at the Tamworth Country Music Festival, but then I'll continue on the tour that he was on in Queensland. Went up the coast into Charters Towers and back down through the New England and New South Wales and finished up in the central west of New South Wales. And he finished at the end of April 1901, and I'll be finishing 125 years later, and then I go back to Winton.
And mate, of course, people can actually book you for special events and corporate events and things like that to talk about it, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, I'm a poet for hire.
Aren't we all? Aren't we all? Mate, is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to throw in? Because I really appreciate your time in going through this. It's been absolutely like a kid in a toy box for me being able to talk about these things that I've looked at and getting to talk to the guy who knows it all. But is there anything we should cover that and add in that we haven't covered?
Maybe we should talk a bit about my own poetry as well. I don't just
Please
do
do.
Banjo Patterson.
Please
When
do.
I do shows at the Caravan Park in Winton, the Roadhouse Caravan and Cabin, oh, the Winton Roadhouse Cabins and Caravan Park, I also do a bit of my own poetry as well as some of the traditionals, and it's a way of showing people that bush poetry is still alive, I guess.
Mate,
And
am I pushing it too far to ask you to recite one of your poems with us?
yeah, one of my favourites is one that I wrote for a slam poetry competition. Slam poetry is where you get 2 minutes to do your own poem, and they
Sure.
pick 5 judges randomly from the audience, and they hold up their scores, and whoever has the best score at the end is the winner. So this is one I wrote
It's like
for.
a rap battle.
Yeah, I guess so. This is what I wrote for them for that occasion. There are people playing awful tricks to have a bit of fun. They're catching blokes, but mostly chicks, and here before I'm done, what I intend to show you is there's no such food as tofu. You heard me right, make no mistake. You may have been misled. The food you eat could be a fake, just messing with your head. Who knows what you might go through if I don't warn you of tofu? They say it's made from curds of soy. That should be enough to ring alarm bells and destroy your urge to eat the stuff. But if that doesn't throw you, then I'll tell the truth of tofu. It all began in secret labs with waste from rubber mats. They found when they disposed of slabs, they'd feed the starving rats. The rubber rats would hoe through is the stuff they now call tofu. Some evil retail mastermind then sold it for a joke, describing it as food that's kind, deceiving hippie folk. He laughed when all his dough grew because there's no such food as tofu. It's just the waste from rubber mills made up to look like food and marketed like health food pills while buyers all get screwed. So when you join the slow queue, please ensure you don't have tofu. I didn't want to say this, but it seems there's still some doubt. See, when this stuff gets in your gut, you may not get it out. When waste drops out below you, have you ever noticed tofu? Of course you haven't. No one has. You know that six-pack feel? That's all the rubber build-up as it fills you meal by meal. The firmness that you grow to comes from rubber labelled tofu. I urge you, look beyond the tricks. It's just a ruthless prank. Those evil rubber lunatics, they laugh right to the bank. No matter how they snow you, look, there's no such food as tofu.
You got a 10 from me, brother. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gregory North, you check out his website down below. Go and see his shows. He's keeping the spirit of Banjo Patterson alive, and he's creating his own art as he goes along the way. Mate, thank you so much for your time and having this chat. And
My pleasure, Nick. Thank you.
Yeah, mate. Nice to meet you, buddy. And a big shout out to our mutual friend John Elliott for passing on a contact, if that's all right.
Yeah, thanks, John. He's a great photographer and a good bloke.
Hey, thanks, Greg. Really appreciate your time, buddy.
My pleasure, Nick. All the best.